We acknowledge that the University of Kansas resides on ancestral territory of several tribal nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Shawnee peoples. Specifically, the university occupies land taken from these nations. This land acknowledgement recognizes that Native Americans are traditional guardians of the land and that there is an enduring relationship between Native peoples and these traditional territories. In addition, we recognize, advocate, and support the sovereignty of the 4 federally recognized tribes of Kansas: the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation, the Kickapoo tribe in Kansas, the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska, and the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska. We also recognize the contributions of the Wyandotte Nation of Kansas in supporting the people in the communities that occupy the lands in which our campuses reside. With that, as we acknowledge and consider our engagement with communities and also our spaces, I would like to introduce the Vice Provost of Academic Success, Dr. Susan Klusmeier, who's going to take us a little bit further in this session with a welcome and our purpose.
Thank you, Jomella. Good morning, everyone. As Jomella said, I'm Susan Klusmeier. I serve as the Vice Provost for Academic Success here at KU. And I also want to welcome you to our 2nd annual Summit on Community Engaged Learning and Scholarship. At the University of Kansas, we value and endeavor to further advance our commitment to community and civic engagement along with our campus and university partners. Let me share a few examples as to how we're demonstrating this commitment. We promote civic engagement as an all-in campus democracy challenge participant. Based on the recent findings from the Tufts University Institute for Democracy and Higher Education, the percentage of KU students voting increased significantly in the last presidential election, rising from 71% in 2020, which was an increase of nearly 20% from 2016. One of our sessions today involves partners from Tufts University Institute for Democracy and Higher Education and the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge, who will discuss how to further enhance the use of census and voting data. Our institutional commitment and importance of this work is also demonstrated by KU's redesignation in 2020 with a community engagement classification by the Carnegie Foundation. The classification is the leading framework for institutional assessment and recognition of community engagement in higher education. The establishment of this summit, as well as KU's Community Engagement Consortium, are intentional responses to continuously enhance our efforts and to establish opportunities to institutionalize and advance community engagement at KU. The goal of today's summit is to engage, connect, and support faculty, staff, administrators, and campus partners who have an interest in supporting the commitment of the public university to address societal issues through campus and community partnerships, including through service learning, community engaged scholarship, and civic engagement. Co-learning, sharing, and brokering connections with faculty, staff, students, and partners interested in collaboratively supporting goals with communities. The summit's coordinated by the Center for Service Learning in close partnership with the KU Libraries and the Commons as sponsors of the keynote address. Our visiting scholar who will share the keynote for the summit is Dr. Andrew Hoffman, author of The Engaged Scholar. Now, it's my honor to introduce our Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor, Dr. Barbara Bichelmeyer, who will moderate the opening roundtable session on Jayhawks Rising, Advancing Community Engagement Through Strategic Doing. Dr. Bichelmeyer is an academic leader in the field of instructional design and technology and was appointed Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor of the University of Kansas in February 2020. Dr. Bichelmeyer is a Kansas City native and holds an appointment as a professor in the KU School of Education and Human Sciences. As KU's Chief Learning Officer, she is primarily responsible for advancing the university's mission, including in championing and furthering the goals outlined in the university's strategic plan. For most of her 30-year career as a faculty member and administrator, Provost Bichelmeyer has examined the process of performance-based instructional design. Dr. Bichelmeyer was a Jayhawk prior to serving as the provost and earned a Bachelor of Science in Journalism degree, a Bachelor of Arts in English, a Master of Science in Educational Policy and Administration, and a doctorate in Educational Communications and Technology, all from KU. Please join me in welcoming Provost Bichelmeyer.
Thank you, Susan, and welcome everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your schedules to be here today and make this a priority. It's important work that we're doing here. At KU, our vision is to be an exceptional learning community that lifts each other and advances society. And we do that through our mission, which is to lift our students in society by educating leaders and building healthy communities and making discoveries that change the world. And although many of you contribute to advancing this mission every day across our campuses and in collaboration with our community partners, there's always another opportunity to further advance our endeavors, including to engage our scholars, and possibly most importantly, to engage our scholars. KU values our commitment to community and civic engagement, and we endeavor to further advance community engaged learning and scholarship for public impact, which is critical to our mission. We just are at a moment in time where demonstrating the value that we provide to the public is not only important in doing the work, it's important in talking about the work and advocating for what we do. So I look forward to our keynote address by Dr. Andrew Hoffman today, which is on expanding the impact of academic research in today's world. In his book, he references the Carnegie Foundation's definition of community engaged scholarship as the application of academic expertise in new and creative ways and in partnership with communities. And that brings really together everything that we do as an institution of higher education, that we take our academic expertise, we apply it, and we help people learn from it, and we make a better world. So it's very timely that we're considering as an institution and in partnership with and across the campuses and communities, how we can further connect, promote, and advance our collective efforts to ensure public impact that's beneficial for most and accessible by our communities as a part of our academic enterprise. We know these conversations are particularly timely, and it's our hope that today we take the time to reflect on our knowledge, make connections, and harness our thoughts towards action for the public good. Over the past couple of years, I've been privileged and had the responsibility to lead KU through institutional planning process using strategic doing to advance our Jayhawks Rising strategic plan. To tell you a little bit about that, Jayhawks Rising strategic plan is based on the book Strategic Doing, 10 Skills for Agile Leadership, which we're using as a framework to support agile and swift leadership at this moment of change and transformation in higher ed. The strategic doing model is a kind of a different process than traditional strategic planning in that it supports more immediate and continuous action and improvement as we implement concrete milestones. Often a critique of senior leadership is that there are transitions that are prior to the completion of a strategic plan, that are ongoing through strategic plans. And it certainly was true in the sense that I walked into a plan that had been well down the path in its development, while I plan to be at KU for the rest of my career and see us through. The good thing about the approach of strategic doing is that it actually provides us a process and a structure that isn't personality dependent and becomes core and fiber of the institution that uses it. So I'm pleased and excited that we've made great process in using that model. Since the beginning of my tenure as provost at KU, it's been an unprecedented time. I kind of walked in the door talking about the fact that we were already in a moment of change and transformation in higher ed. And the COVID pandemic has only amplified change and transformation, not only in higher ed, but in every sector. And it's also created a clear call for the further need to make sure that we come through this period in history by creating more equity than we've ever had before and addressing needs that have been pressing for so long. This is a period in which both agile and adaptive leadership is truly necessary. So to give you just a brief reminder kind of the time frame and where we've been and what we've done, in February of 2020, which was just as I was walking in the door and prior to, excuse me, the COVID pandemic coming to the University of Kansas campus. And just in the end of my first week, I hosted with the Chancellor and introduced the strategic doing process. We convened a public planning session and we began collectively identifying objective areas that we wanted to address. By March, literally a couple of weeks later, we had quickly transitioned to a remote learning environment as we faced the onset of COVID. And so for the remainder of the spring 2020 academic year and through the summer of 2020, we really focused Jayhawks Rising in our strategic plan by adapting it to consider how to be responsive to the immediate and pressing needs related to the academic system and how we address that in the period of COVID. In the context of convening that initial Jayhawks Rising team work in the summer of 2020 was to further identify our objectives and key results that would not only inform our responses to COVID, but would also indicate for us areas of longer term institutional priorities and change that we would need to work on. And through this work and all that was involved with 200 campus partners during that time, we identified things that are known as OKRs, or objectives and key results. And many of you here were probably likely involved in that work in one of those design teams or another. And I, again, greatly appreciate all the effort that went into that. When we got to 2021, we shifted a bit the focus of the strategic planning process, and we wanted to start to make this everybody's work and their regular roles and responsibilities. And so we started to identify objective leaders to further advance these key objective areas we had, and to work with stakeholder groups to begin to identify and work on the strategies and actions that are going to move us towards our goals. We identified as our objective leaders co-chairs, and we had one dean and one vice provost in each one of those areas who have been working to create structure there and start to draw in the teams of people who have responsibilities for each one of our focus objectives to begin to change the work that we do in our regular operations in the university to help align best as possible our work so that we meet our goals. The Jayhawks Rising Strategic Plan is organized, to remind you, around 3 institutional priorities. One ties very closely to creating clear direction to fulfill our mission to educate leaders, and that's student success. The second one is about building healthy communities and having a vibrant community at KU and creating vibrant community beyond. And then the third, of course, is in our research and discovery and enterprise and helps us to grow and advance our efforts in making discoveries that change the world. What's notable about these 3 areas of our mission is that it's focused on community engagement and public impact as part of our learning enterprise across all 3 of those areas. Certainly, we want to have community engagement and have impact on the community in preparing students for success and making sure they're ready to go out and have careers and be civic leaders. Certainly, we want our research to have impact, and certainly creating a healthy and vibrant community at KU and beyond has an expectation and requirement of community engagement underneath that. So as we determine how to best advance this institutional plan, we've also endeavored to be sensitive to all the pressing needs and demands of our faculty, staff, students, and partners in this moment of COVID as a pandemic, and within our campus and broader communities. And that's one reason why we've tried not to add a layer with the strategic plan. We've started to use the strategic plan to focus our work and think about what we can strip away that we're doing that really doesn't promote the success of our goals and our objectives as articulated in the strategic plan. And so with the recognition that there are prior and existing efforts already prioritizing and assembling the range of stakeholders we've involved, there really is intentionality here to both align and further support the actions of our stakeholder groups who are already championing and advancing objectives through the Jayhawk Rising process. And in the area of service, local and global, there have been efforts, there continue to be efforts, there are efforts to include the KU Community Engagement Consortium and the ACE Internationalization Lab that are convening a broad range of campus stakeholders to identify and advance strategies in this area. Though, thus, through Jayhawks Rising, we're first tapping into existing stakeholder groups who are already engaged and committed to examining campus needs and actions, which may offer a synergistic and sustainable approach. And through this panel session today, we're going to discuss Jayhawks Rising and the strategic doing process. And as a strategic doing process, we're going to highlight the importance of community engagement in advancing our institutional priorities. And we're going to include a critical component of achieving the vision of Jayhawks Rising. And additionally, we'll consider how some of the considerations posed in Dr. Hoffman's book impact us, and we'll have that framing throughout our discussion. So we're going to move at this point in time into a general introduction of the panelists and do some opening questions. So panelists, if you'd like to turn on your cameras at this point in time, I'm going to introduce everybody and then ask some general questions for all panelists to answer, and then we'll do some specific questions. So I am pleased today to be joined by our Associate Vice Provost for International Affairs, Charlie Bankart. Wait, Charlie. I'm joined by our Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs and Faculty Development, Chris Brown. I'm joined by our Vice Provost for Academic Success, Susan Klusmeier. Joined by our Vice Provost for Academic Affairs and Graduate Studies, Jen Roberts. And our Vice Chancellor at the KU Med Center, who works in the Institute for Community Engagement, Ryan Spaulding. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us today. And our Interim Vice Provost for Lifelong and Professional Education, Emily Zentner. So I'll just start with a general question for anybody who wants to jump in and kind of help me navigate the conversation. So as I've set that up, and you all, are doing this work every day, it's part of your regular job responsibilities. We're trying to highlight the importance of it as we do our work under Jayhawks Rising. So when you think about all that, as an institution, based on your respective areas of leadership, what are one or two critical ways that you each think that we're advancing our commitment to community engagement, including through our institutional priorities and planning, or the strategic doing process?
Barb, I'll start. Thanks. I just want to make a comment about the Jayhawks Rising process that I've come to appreciate. It's a struggle during COVID and during various webinars and things for us to truly be engaged with each other, face to face. But what the structure of the strategic doing has done from an objective leader standpoint in engaging people that are going to be actually responsible for doing things in the work is that there's been a lots of opportunity for alignment. We've all been challenged to make sure whatever it is that we're doing, we know what each other is doing in these areas so that we can find areas for synergy, resources that we didn't know about that already exist, initiatives that already exist. And so because of that, I have an opportunity in meetings to be sure that things like community engagement is on people's minds and that we're looking for ways to promote it as one of our priorities.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And I do hope that people will start to see the benefits of the fact that one thing for sure that I think is a focus for all of us doing this work is we are trying to break down kind of historical silos, or being so busy working in our own lane that we're not really talking about and thinking about the impact. And I do think that's one way we start to foster community engagement, because it starts with us connecting with each other and understanding the impacts on each other.
I'll jump in here because I wanted to segue from what Chris said. I'm Ryan Spaulding at KU Med Center, and we've had community engagement formalized in our strategic plan for decades, literally for decades. But as Chris just indicated, there's so much community engagement going on. What we're doing is actually trying to better organize and strategize and really optimize what we're doing. So the two items we have going on that have been going on for almost 2 years now are, we have a rural health task force, which is really focused on all of our rural health community engagement. That's been meeting Friday mornings, every Friday morning at 7 a.m. since January of 2020, if that gives you some idea of how committed we are to that process. And that's being led through our School of Medicine. And then secondly, we have been meeting almost as long with a different group, some overlap, but a lot of other individuals on our efforts in Kansas City, Kansas, which is our backyard for the medical center. And I've been pushing that effort forward. And several folks from the Lawrence campus and the Edwards campus are participating in that. So we have two sort of parallel, really major planning activities underway. And community engagement is listed as one of our top domains in our strategic plans. So these new initiatives are really just to even take it to the next level, I would say. So those are just two examples, but we have many others. So I'll let others jump in.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And I do appreciate that. And I appreciate the connections that we're starting to forge, strengthening the relationships between the Med Center and Lawrence and Edwards in that work as well, because, you'll be hearing more about this in coming days, if not weeks and months. But when we think about who we're doing this for, I think and why we're doing this, I think it is appreciate to say, or it's helpful to say that we need to appreciate there's a unique aspect of rural, and we're going to be doing more on the Lawrence campus as well to connect with the Rural Health Initiative there. But we're also looking at international, and we're also looking at the needs in the urban space, in particular with underrepresented minorities there, because it's underrepresented minorities are urban, rural, and international in terms of the access that we need to provide to create that engagement. And Charlie, that sets you up a little bit there. You were raising your hand.
As I think about this from the international perspective, one of the big challenges we have as such a large and complex institution like KU is to map our international capacities, our expertise, our passions with community needs and interests. And really, because of our size and our vast reach, the community of Jayhawks has connections across the city, the state, the region, and the world. And we're both well known and respected for our work. But with that said, I think too much is left to interpersonal networks and individual responsiveness. For the community to engage us and tap into our expertise, and for us to align ourselves in ways that serve our communities best, there must be a greater awareness and access to who we are and what we do, both from within the university or across the university, but with the outside as well. We need to create, in some ways, for want of a better term, and to kind of date myself, a dynamic KU Yellow Pages that really enhance informed access for engagement. And for us, thinking about our work in the internationalization space, and what Ryan mentioned about rural engagement, one of the pieces that we're thinking about and actually planning on here over the next few months is to unfold a couple of specific initiatives that are designed to begin addressing this issue of transparency and communication and awareness building for community engagement in that international space. One is to develop an online map of KU's international connections and capacities. Where are our students from? Who are our Kansas students, or where are our Kansas students going on study abroad? Where are our international partnerships, and what's strategic about those? And who are the faculty members who are leading those research engagements and mobility collaborations? What kind of industry partnerships do we have, and internship capacities have we developed that are serving our students, our region, our state, and the world? But also to roll out an international web template that enables us as academic units and administrative units to really report out on the vast, deep, interesting international activity that's happening across the board. Because we don't have systems for kind of harnessing that information and focusing it and communicating it, so much that's done goes unacknowledged or underappreciated and underutilized because people don't have a window into what we're doing with an idea that there's a person behind that can be engaged by a community and serve a really specific purpose.
Yeah, great, Charlie. And there's so much that's going on. I appreciate you highlighting those two examples, but we also, again, should give a shout out to the dozens and dozens and dozens of people who have been involved in the ACE Internationalization Lab and helping us kind of look at and reflect on all the things we're doing to engage internationally, but think about how can we organize to do it better. And I should acknowledge that you and Jen and Susan, along with Megan Green, are co-chairs of that initiative. And it certainly does connect with things that we're now doing differently, graduate and undergraduate level, and I think you'll hear some more about that as well. So let me shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to propose at this point to ask some specific questions to the panelists, kind of about what you're doing in your area. And again, there's just so many things that are going on, and it's hard to keep track of them all, but there are connections that we're creating. So I want to acknowledge that under the Jayhawks Rising strategic plan, and I believe it kind of sits under the Healthy and Vibrant Communities core institutional priority, we have one that is strengthen service, or we have an objective that says strengthen service to local and global communities. And our co-chairs of that group are Charlie and his work in the international space, Dr. Watson-Thompson, all that she's doing in her role and in community engagement, and then Emily Zentner, who's representing on our efforts and attempts really through all sorts of different kind of programming to create support for elders and through non-credit bearing programming to do more opportunities for workforce development and doing some of that work related to Edwards, but also just in the non-credit bearing space for the entire university. So as a group, those three are great objective leaders for this objective we have in the strategic plan under Healthy and Vibrant Communities. So let me ask a question specifically to Emily at this point in time. As an objective leader of the area of service to local and global communities, what have been some of the important considerations that you and the leadership have been thinking about and that are helpful for broader campus and community to understand about how both community engagement and lifelong learning are being advanced through the Jayhawk Rising strategic doing process?
Yeah, we have had many discussions, many considerations that have been factors in what we've decided here. One was to really utilize, as already been mentioned, all the great work that's really underway already at KU, really building on those existing initiatives instead of reinventing them. The Community Engagement Consortium, the Office of International Affairs, they've all done a lot of great work behind the scenes at KU over the last couple of years to research gaps, identify issues, brainstorm solutions. And it really gives us a great point to leverage that work and hit the ground running with this so we can take action immediately and really start making some difference. We also want to recognize through these efforts, we talked about the importance of recognizing the work that's being done across KU, the faculty, the students, as well as the staff. I think recognition is a huge part of making sure that things are advanced, the people's efforts are recognized and rewarded when possible. And I'm an accountant by training. I'm all about numbers. I'm all about outcomes and benchmarks. And so we've talked about having the numbers, metrics, systems, outcomes, benchmarking, data tracking to really take something here that is not often tracked very well or recognized very well, and finding ways to be able to track that for advancement and promotion opportunities. This objective area really dovetails nicely with the work we do in lifelong and professional education. I appreciated everything you said about what we do. Several of our programs really do have strong community connections. We train thousands of people every year in emergency responder roles and provide lifelong learning opportunities for seniors. So connections to communities is really vital to our work. So we're very excited about that and excited to be part of this and advancing what we can do at KU for our communities.
Great. Thanks very much for that, Emily. And I do want to point out, you said something really important, and that is that we are building our future on the foundation of great work that's already been done and continues to be done through COVID. And I don't think we can say that enough and appreciate enough the fact that we have a strong institution here. We have great people who are doing really excellent work throughout time in difficult circumstances. And we need to be more appreciative and acknowledging of that as we recognize it. And then we further refine it and strengthen it and support it so that we can have more of it. Charlie, just quickly as we go on, and we've got about 10 minutes left in this part of the session, can you give a little more detail specifically about the work of the ACE Internationalization Lab and how it relates to community engagement under Jayhawks Rising?
Yeah, so I think one of the big pieces here for us to be thinking about from the work of the Internationalization Lab is who is the community that we're trying to engage. And one of the critical parts of the laboratory has been to reach out not just to internal constituencies to KU, but also to external constituencies because those that we serve include not just students, faculty, and alumni, but the Kansas and national workforce, industry, the higher ed community, social service sector, local and state government, federal government, international partner organizations and foreign governments, not-for-profits, multinational organizations. And what we're hearing from folks across the board, businesses require a workforce that's educated for a global marketplace of goods, services, and ideas. Social service professionals, especially in Kansas, are engaged with and challenged by an ever-diversifying local community that is informed by global mobility trends. And so our schools are multilingual, multicultural, have different contexts that our school boards and our city managers have to engage. So as we've been talking with people across the state and the region to inform KU's actions, it's really underscored for us how important it is for us to harness and leverage the critical resources that we have. And I'm thinking about this from the perspective of our strength in languages and area studies, for example, but also the interdisciplinary work that's happening across the professional schools in that international space. So that we can begin to engage and prepare civic leaders for a diverse population. We can help school districts engage, but also prepare tomorrow's leaders through a KU education and our faculty members who are engaging in research around the world with that context. So that's where the lab is directing our efforts in terms of faculty support and engagement, creating student opportunities, ensuring that the curriculum is aligned to develop strong intercultural and cross-cultural competencies, but also an awareness that we're not an island in and of ourselves, that we're connected to that world and serve the world through the local context.
So Charlie, a couple really important things I just say for the group, picking up on your languages. Who are the communities we're engaging, and the importance of connection as the means of engagement. And that's why it is so critical for us to recognize how much is already going on, and we're just trying to create better connections and recognize we really are doing it to serve and the impact on the groups that we're serving and the individuals we're serving. So thanks for that and all you're doing, and thanks over to Jen and Susan as well, and to Megan if you're watching. So let me turn a question to Jen at this point in time in her role as Vice Provost for Academic Affairs and Graduate Studies. And she's the objective leader for Jayhawks Rising in the area of supporting long-term success by improving placement and reducing debt for students. And this is critical, right? Because the dollars that students are investing through tuition are greater than they've ever been. We have lower socioeconomic levels of students here, and they have to know that they've got a future as a result of the work we're doing. So Jen, as you all are doing your work and thinking about this, how do we better prepare and train students to be engaged scholars, and how's Jayhawk Rising advancing that goal? And what are some of the approaches that you're planning on using through Jayhawks Rising or other efforts that are going to advance the preparation, the training, and really the career placement, so students become engaged scholars while they're here, and then carry that on to their careers and through the rest of their lives?
Yeah, no, great question, Barb. In this one objective, what we found and what I will echo from what other people have said is just how interconnected all of these objectives are. So, certainly one of the important things that we're doing in our specific objective is really at this point just to get the data that we need to really understand where our students are struggling financially, how we can better use the resources we have to help them, and when they need, which points in their career they need that. Similarly, we need to do a better job of getting our understanding where our graduates are going, but then also linking that to the jobs that we know are there, and where I think the exciting place that we connect with some of the other pieces of the academic mission are then how we can create new and vibrant programs that we know are going to engage students, give them the skills that they need, but then connect them to a whole multitude of jobs and careers. And so that's where kind of connections between these different objectives have been really, really interesting, because while I'm the objective leader for this one, I'm actually in charge of lots of tasks and strategies for these others, because they're all really interconnected. The better we can create and envision these vibrant programs, but then also ensure that we're getting our students through those programs, that we're not allowing them to drop off, that we're keeping connected with them and having them persist. All of those things are going to be essential in making sure that they're not spending more money than they need to, if they have a very clear path and support to get them through, while we're also giving them all of those skills and knowledge that they need to then be successful in their career.
Yeah, that's great. And I should say for everybody in the audience, and when Jen talks about the number of things that she's doing in her role and bringing all this together, I'd note that many of the new initiatives that we're working through, for different reasons. One, for example, as impetus from our last Higher Learning Commission mid-cycle review, helping to get degree maps in place so students can see their track through, that they can finish in 4 or 5 years, and get that done. And that we're clearly articulating our learning objectives in our programs and at the institutional level, so students can clearly see what they're going to get out of it. And then Jen's chairing the Academic Program Coordinating Council, which is made up of associate deans who have academic affairs responsibilities in each school, so that we can look at our programming and make sure that we have what we need to be innovative with our disciplines, but that it serves purposes to help students have the best possible opportunities to find work and to be independent, autonomous adults when they leave. So all of that's under this framing, but again, highly connected and coordinated in that work. Susan has a similar role as Vice Provost of Academic Success. Oh, and so thank you, Jen, for that as well. So Susan's similar role is that she's the Vice Provost for Academic Success, and she's one of the co-objective leaders for the area of assuring retention and completion through student engagement and satisfaction. So Susan, in our efforts to retain students and support timely progress to degree completion, there is an importance in advancing community engagement, even in those areas as well, and other experiences that are a core component of how we support our students. So can you talk to us a little bit about how Jayhawks Rising and the work that you're doing under that is further advancing opportunities to assure both the pathways for students to integrate community engagement and other related experiences that we know support retention, completion, and that might bring in your answers, advising and career services and all those other things you do. So
yeah, absolutely. So it's amazing when I think about so for those of you that aren't aware, the Center for Service Learning that Dr. Watson-Thompson leads is part of Academic Success. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing and that she's been taking the leadership of with her team has really been not just about how are we connecting our students through experiential learning opportunities and service and civic engagement, but really how are we thinking holistically about the student experience? And as we think about our student success model and as our students navigate through the institution, how are we using these partnerships to provide services that are going to support our students? Because we know our students are going to engage in services outside of the institution. How are we learning from these community partnerships about our students and the communities they're coming from to ensure that the support and services that we're providing them are well-rounded and meeting their needs, and that they are changing and shifting to meet those needs? But then also, how are we taking, as our students are developing and learning and exploring, whether they come in knowing exactly what they want to do or they're unsure completely, how are we using these opportunities through some of those curricular and co-curricular experiences to help them explore, to help them solidify what it is they want to do and start to build that confidence in what the plan is for their time beyond KU, whether that's continuing their education or maybe it's starting in that career, and thinking about how are we creating and developing that workforce? How are we keeping our students in Kansas? How are we helping them find that community? And so much of that goes through community engagement. I want to reiterate something that we've all been talking about this morning, which is really the work that has been done. And I really see Jayhawks Rising as a way to elevate and make a broader awareness across campus of what work has been done. And I think in this space, you know, through the consortium that Dr. Watson-Thompson leads, and through some of the other partnerships, right, we've started to have those conversations about what are we already doing? What partnerships are there? Where are there gaps? And now with Jayhawks Rising, it allows us to elevate this in a way where we're thinking a little bit more holistically about all the communities we're trying to serve, and then making sure we're doing some work to identify and fill in those gaps. So I'm excited for what's to come. I think this is going to really make for a more robust student experience that we've been working towards. And it's going to make us a little bit more nimble as we are thinking about the shifting and changing needs of our students and working together as a campus community to do that.
Yeah, and I really greatly appreciate that point about kind of comprehensive look and at the same time being comprehensive and nimble, because we have to be responsive and adaptive, and our students tell us that constantly, and to do it in a way that's caring. And I think that's a lot of what engagement's about, hearing them and responding to what they need. So thank you for all the work you're doing. I'm going to do two more quick questions here for Chris and for Ryan, and then shift, just so you know, as how we're working timing for those in the background who are trying to coordinate all this activity. So Chris, in your role as Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs and Faculty Development, the objective that you're working on with your co-lead is recruiting and retaining and recognizing top researchers. And that might not sound necessarily like it has anything to do with community engagement. But when you read Hoffman's book, he states, if you want to change behavior, you have to change the reward system. And so when you think about what we need to do, can you talk a little bit about how this particular objective in Jayhawks Rising might help us to think differently about how we're better about promoting, rewarding, and recognizing community engaged scholars, and that's our faculty and our staff as well, and thinking about how we're under Jayhawks Rising integrating prior feedback and considerations from groups who've been talking about this and other initiatives, whether it's community engagement and consortium, or whether what you've heard from P&T committees in the past. So how are we thinking about how we might change those recognition and reward systems and bring people in who are excited to do community engaged scholarship?
Thanks, Barb. Yeah, really, I'll try to be as brief as I can because I know we're short on time. I'm also involved in under Jomella's objective in helping in terms of rewards and recognition for faculty in the area of engaged work. So there's real opportunities for alignment there. Let me just focus on three big overarching ways of talking about the doing that we're going to be engaged in that covers all of those areas. One is we've got to engage the doers. As Ryan said, there's so many people doing engaged work in the area of hiring new faculty, where that's a priority, and we're diversifying our faculty as a result of that. But there are also units that are actively doing the work in changing their promotion and tenure guidelines, their annual faculty review guidelines, to make sure that the work that people are doing, that they're hiring people for, is recognized and rewarded. We need to listen to and engage with those groups. We're doing that in one of our sessions today in the activities today. We need to advertise and help provide pathways for other units to follow similar steps to changing their promotion and tenure guidelines if that's what they want to do. And then at the university level, we need to think about what we can do in general terms in our promotion and tenure guidelines to signal to other units across campus that this is high impact recognized work that we want people to be rewarded for. There's a data issue with all this too. We need to make sure that there's ways for faculty and staff to report the work that they're doing so that they can be recognized and rewarded for it. And then if you put all that together, the rewards come, including awards. We need to recognize our faculty and our staff with awards. Where are those awards? How do we develop streamlined nomination processes so that more and more of our faculty and staff are recognized for the great work that they've been doing for years here on campus? All of this is towards building rewarding careers for faculty and staff.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And that is big and very important work. And it's certainly changing not just the way KU, but the way all of higher ed has thought about work of faculty. So I know it's a big lift, but I know we have great partners in our faculty leaders and governance and in the deans very supportive of this work as well. And to that point, if we get better and more rewarding careers for faculty, that alone will be worth it. But to do that in a way that engages the community for broader impacts will be, a phenomenal change in the way we do our work. So last question on the panel is for Ryan. And Ryan, we've introduced you a little bit before. Again, we're so happy to have you here and the representation that there's partnership going on between the Med Center campus and the Lawrence Edwards campus. In Hoffman's book, he states that the increasing insularity of our individual academic fields tends to distance us from the world around us. And whether this approach will create real world change is a question rarely, if ever, asked. We're a large institution. We have multiple campuses and endeavors to serve many communities, and certainly impacted around the campuses where we're located. Can you share a little bit more about the efforts of the KCK planning group, and even if you want to speak very briefly to the rural health group, to align our efforts within and across the campuses so that we can be working together to meaningfully contribute and engage community? Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely, and I'll try to be brief as well. I think we're just a little over, but in both situations, there is a really strong recognition that there's already so much going on, and in both planning processes, we actually spent the first several months of just hearing from a lot of the folks and the programs who are already doing a lot of community engaged research and education and even clinical care. So that was what set up the planning process in both situations. And as we did that, obviously we kept hearing about what Edwards is doing or what KU Lawrence is doing, and of course what's happening at KU Med Center. So it's just logical to us that we would want to try to figure out how to tie everything together and align everything. It doesn't make sense to duplicate and overuse resources that don't need to be used, and try to leverage what's already in place. So in particular, in the Kansas City, Kansas planning process that I'm pushing forward, I just about every time we meet, I stress, what can we do rather than create new programs? What can we do to really maximize the ones that we already have and just make them work better? Because what we're trying to do now, and this is especially true in Kansas City, Kansas, there's been efforts in Kansas City, Kansas for decades around clinical care, education, and research, but the needle hasn't been moved very much in terms of the healthcare outcomes in Kansas City, Kansas. So what are we not doing? In other words, what can we do better to really try to move that needle on some of those healthcare outcomes? And it seems to me, even though we don't want to reduce or eliminate the community engagement that's going on, we should try to figure out how to move it in kind of the same direction. So that's what our goal is. We don't want to discourage any community engagement, but what we want to do is try to get people connected to each other, as several folks today have said on the roundtable. Otherwise, it's just a lot of folks working in that insular fashion, that sort of siloed fashion, and it's really hard to move the needle when that occurs.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, what I really appreciate about that is the point that we all benefit if we maximize existing activities as opposed to creating new initiatives and new activities, which is a big kind of part of the framing device for Jayhawks Rising and the strategic doing approach that we're using. And particularly in, great example of thinking about impacting clinical outcomes in KCK. And we were just in a conversation earlier this week about opportunities, particularly for the aging population, to think about social determinants of health and how we partner with Med Center folks to address that aspect, because the clinical care is impacted by that. So hopefully just in all of this, for everybody on the panel and everybody who's participating and watching, we hope that really what you've gotten out of this is we're signaling the importance of community engagement across the three traditional areas of what we do at KU: student success, growing research, and having healthy and vibrant communities. And we hope that we've maybe excited you a little bit about the work or enticed you into the idea of strategic doing. And if you want to be involved, we invite you to go to the Jayhawks Rising webpage, and there's a link there's a page on getting involved and an opportunity for you to volunteer. And I think they're going to put that link in the chat here. And we encourage you to think about that, and we'll figure out as we're organizing everything where you can be and how we can place you and your expertise to benefit the community. And if you have any more interest in learning more about or contributing to any of the aligned stakeholder groups that we've been mentioning, the KU Community Engagement Consortium, the AC Internationalization Lab efforts, the KCK Planning Group, then please email the Center for Service Learning at csl@ku.edu, and they'll help you get connected. So I want to thank you again to all the panelists who were here and telling us about what you're doing. Most importantly, thank you for what you're doing for KU and for all in our community.